Yep, you read that one right, fellas. Nintendo is officially set to completely lose their lawsuit against Palworld, and now there's not much of anything that Nintendo can do to stop it. There's a lot to go over, so let's get into it. From Windows Central, Nintendo wanted to block Palworld. Now it faces a 0% chance and a measly $30,000 payout. And oh man, this is amazing. Oh, this is the best news ever, guys. So what happened? Well, it turns out Nintendo was trying to swing its massive wallet around and destroy Palworld for a good year and a bit, thinking, we can get away with it, right? As GamesFrey, who's been at the epicenter of this conflict, confirms here, Nintendo officially has a 0 chance of winning their lawsuit now, according to new information. According to what's being presented, the public record here strongly confirms that both parties, Nintendo and Pocket Pair, have completed their pleadings and submissions of evidence, which pretty much means they can no longer submit more evidence or claims, and now this is all locked in stone. The final court presentation for this whole thing is now scheduled for October 1st, 2026, after which a decision will be finalized in November 2026, and a key point of this entire thing, as seen here, is Nintendo has confirmed that going forward, their claims and what they want from this case will only be usable against older versions of Palworld, but that this has no effect or power over the current state of Palworld as a whole, considering, in case you don't know, Palworld will be going into its 1.0 official release come July 10th this year. So Nintendo looked at what Pocket Pair was doing, saw the tsunami of awesome, and went, well, we can't stop that, can we? And their lawyers put their hands on their shoulders and went, nope, no, you cannot. This effectively narrows the scope of what Nintendo can even do going forward, because by admitting that their claims have no basis in the court of law, considering the current state of Palworld, it means Nintendo knows deep down they done goofed, guys, like really badly. They flew too close to the sun, and now this Pidgeotto is cooked, as the kids would say. Another point given is that due to what's going on here, Nintendo will also have no injunction of impact on anything that Pocket Pair does going forward. In case you don't know what that means, an injunction is a court order that forces a party in a lawsuit to make a very specific action. An injunction can also be a similar court order that restrains one party from legally doing something due to the lawful bind that they're also in. So either the courts realize that Nintendo is rightfully in the wrong, and this will, in theory, stop Nintendo from ever attacking Pocket Pair again. Or the injunction could also be used to tell Nintendo, you cannot legally do this to any other games with similar mechanics, meaning Nintendo is having their hands tied, and developers and players can have a sigh of relief. Finally, Nintendo is also only eligible, based on all of their legal claims and attacks against Pocket Pair, to only get a small victory in all of this, as seen here. The most that Nintendo is set to earn from this lawsuit now is $30,000, which is peanuts in the grand scheme of probably how much Nintendo likely spent on their lawyers and their other fees, dragging on this lawsuit for as long as they already did, because if you don't remember, Nintendo's original claims were very serious. You see, they wanted Palworld to be erased from existence. That was really the goal of this lawsuit. Nintendo firmly stated if they won their lawsuit, which they filed in the first place, of course, that when successful, Pocket Pair would need to remove Palworld from all platforms available and destroy any copies of the game. That included any merchandise, t-shirts, any collaborations already done or that are in the works, all of it. Nintendo was so hungry for this annihilation, they were willing to destroy Palworld to ensure that nobody could ever challenge their throne. But why even do that? Simple. It's about Pokemon. As a brand, Pokemon is the most profitable brand in the world right now. They eclipse even the Marvel Cinematic Universe, all the Disney stuff. Like, Pokemon makes so much money that Nintendo could just do Pokemon games and they would still be billionaires. That's why this matters. It wasn't because Palworld was even really encroaching on their turf, because Palworld is not available on Nintendo's platforms. It's definitely not going to come there now in the future, I'm guessing as well, but it's only playable on everything outside of Nintendo's ecosystem, right? Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, but Nintendo was so greedy. They wanted nobody to have an alternative to Pokemon because it would mean that they would make less money. And I think that's really the scummiest part of all of this for me, because Palworld existing wouldn't even affect Nintendo's Pokemon sales. because they wouldn't be competing on their platform for Pokemon anyways. They just simply didn't want you to have a choice in the matter, so that if you did want a monster capturing game like that, well, you'd have to buy into the latest Nintendo ecosystem or you'd be out of luck. It's all about money and dominance, and Nintendo really thought that they could swing their wallet around and control everybody, but nope, that is not the case now. As Games Frey said it here, Palworld 1.0 is going to launch soon, and given that Nintendo's patent assertions can't impact that release in any meaningful way, the question is whether Nintendo will recognize that patents are not the answer to competition in this space or bring additional lawsuits against Pocket Pair. The fact that Nintendo is finding it increasingly hard to obtain game rule patents in key jurisdictions may dissuade Nintendo, and possibly also other companies in the games industry, from filing any further lawsuits of this kind. And that to me is the biggest of wins here, because Nintendo is by and large one of the biggest publishers ever, right? I mean, not many people are bigger than Nintendo really. They have generational wealth, they have like no debts, and they're the only major publisher who seems to not be struggling as badly when it comes to making exclusive games for cheaper too. But what this means is that if Nintendo, of all people, couldn't convince the courts of the world, especially in Japan, that they are in the wrong and that they have no power here, then what hope does any other greedy publisher or whoever really have when it comes to similar lawsuit ideas? This has now opened the floodgates, but kind of in the best way possible. It means by Pocket Pair winning this lawsuit, which in October they will, as all signs state Nintendo has nothing on them now, it means everyone can now make whatever game they want in the future. Will this mean that we're going to see other Pokemon-like games? Oh yeah, you're going to see a lot more now, definitely. But that's going to sting Nintendo the hardest, because for so long, right, they've made average to maybe below like average Pokemon games for years. Because let's be real, the quality didn't matter. People would buy it anyways. The fact that Legend ZA sold what it did in its time frame, which was something like almost 6 million copies, I think, in a single week, which is the lifetime sales of Crimson Desert on all available platforms combined, is insane. Nintendo knows that Pokemon's power is undefeated. They never have to innovate or give you anything you ask for, because why? Where are you going to go play Pokemon elsewhere? You can't, right? That's the point. It's also why Pokemon games are now full price instead of being cheaper like before, right? These games are made for next to nothing in terms of dev cost, yet they still rake in millions, if not billions every year. But now that Palworld is set to win the way that it is, it kind of sets a new standard and future for Pokemon, because now Palworld can grow. They could, in theory, make a new Palworld game with something similar to gym badges and all that, and Nintendo, having lost their lawsuit, would have no grounds to sue Pocket Pair again in the future. Because if they couldn't convince the courts that they owned the Pokeball concept or summoning creatures, which they tried, by the way, there's no way they're going to win the concept of saying that, oh, earning a badge or something similar, like, I don't know, a star maybe, doesn't matter, because Nintendo loses, is the point. And now that people will have options with Palworld out and free to do whatever it wants on rival hardware, no less, this sets another scary precedent and question for Nintendo. What do you do now? Palworld was $40 at release. The same game you bought then, once it becomes the 1.0 version soon, you will still have access all the same, right? Like, Pokemon games these days are all full priced. The DLCs alone, like the Mega Dimension one for ZA, cost about the same as Palworld as a whole for DLC, guys. I think that's another big reason why Nintendo was so hellbent here, because Pokemon's dominance allowed them as a publisher and a development studio to, in a way, indulge with their baddest habits, because no one could really do anything about it. And some may be asking, well, why isn't Nintendo allowed to seek further payment of like damages and stuff? Why only $30,000? Well, as Game Frey says it here, the 3 patents in suit were filed and published a while after Palworld's release, thereby limiting the damages period and capturing only some more recent Palworld sales. So Palworld launched in January 2024, where it made the majority of its money, like most games, selling something close to about 12 million copies out of the gate, which made it easily one of the biggest new IP releases of all time. However, Nintendo, and maybe their biggest mistake, was slow when it came to their lawsuits, and didn't actually file these in a timely manner when it came to the release window of Palworld. Therefore, they lost out on a lot of money. It might have been millions that they could have gained if they did this earlier, but the early bird gets the worm in this case, as Games Frey explains here. They, Nintendo, claimed back priority to the original patent application, which means that they are are treated for validity purposes as if they had been filed in 2021, but that is separate from when there actually was a patent. So Nintendo cooked themselves. That's what that means. So because these patents weren't given real validity until then, Nintendo cannot swindle their way forward. That's the point. But besides that, Palworld was also heavily modified throughout its journey to its 1.0 release, which it's almost at now. Meaning that the damages that Nintendo could claim were, like I said earlier, against an older version of the game that technically no longer exists given where the game is now. Interestingly though, the damages that Nintendo will get, that 30,000, is very limited in terms of sales, because the only slight win Nintendo got there could be in their home country of Japan. So that 30,000 hypothetical awarded is in relation to the sales of Palworld in only Japan, but not the rest of the world. That's very key here, because the majority of players of Palworld obviously exist outside of Japan, which makes sense, since the developers years ago infamously confirmed the only reason that they put guns in Palworld was to appeal to American players, because in their own words, Americans love guns. GamesFrey further stated here, Nintendo might also get nothing if the patents are found valid and or never to have been infringed. Pocket Pair filed numerous invalid challenges and non-infringement arguments, but even if we assume for the sake of the argument that there was some infringement in 2024, it was a short period. The sales volume was limited, and Nintendo cannot recover damages on worldwide sales in Japan. A Japanese patent is only valid in Japan, like a US patent is valid only in the United States. So they cooked themselves even further, huh? That's really interesting. They kind of screwed up their only filing these patents when they did it domestically. Maybe they would have had more power if they had more, I guess, international patents, but I think even then, they still wouldn't have won overall. Because you can't own gameplay ideas like capturing monsters or summoning help. Too many games already use these concepts to some degree, even if it's without a Pokeball. It still ties together the same way is the point, and Nintendo is very mad now because that's the case clearly. This also doesn't even mean that Nintendo's going to get that 30K, by the way. It's just that based on the current patents and how this lawsuit is currently set up, that 30K that they're saying, that's the highest payout hypothetically that Nintendo is capable of getting now. So that's the best case scenario, which likely won't even remotely cover the expenses of the lawyers within Japan on Nintendo's behalf. I also think whoever was in charge of this lawsuit on Nintendo's behalf, yeah, they might have to find a new job. Because Nintendo definitely did not want this outcome, because if this Hail Mary attempt didn't work, how is anything else going to? Yeah, the answer is next to impossible, and that's good. And this now positions Palworld and Pocket Pair in the best possible position they could be in right now. Because with 1.0 releasing, it will likely be the second biggest launch of Palworld since the very beginning. Players will now be able to explore the world tree. There's going to be more new pals, of course, to capture and train than any update before it. And in general, this will be the biggest content drop for Palworld players since that game's inception. Meaning Nintendo not only failed, but Palworld is about to, well, soar again. And they can't do anything about it this time, which is awesome to see. But this does need to be commended on Pocket Pair's part too, because they never gave up on their game, nor their community. They were able to essentially patch their way out of Nintendo's lawsuit. But what doomed Nintendo further was that they kept narrowing their lawsuit more and more by constantly trying to tweak it mid-lawsuit, so they could move the needle to where they thought they needed it to be. I think the fact that you can patent new lawsuits or alter existing ones that are a part of a lawsuit that's ongoing, no less, that seems kind of not fair in my opinion, but that's what Nintendo was trying to do. They had multiple versions of the same patents against Palworld, each with slightly different wording so that if one didn't work, it's fine. We got 5 other variations. It's scummy, but that's how these companies do it. To make things worse, Nintendo did try back in April 2026 as seen here to swindle even more patents. And this was across the American side of the lawsuit, right? This is from Windows Central, by the way. So all 26 patents, which were all variations, they were thankfully rejected by the US government because Nintendo was told that these lawsuits were unoriginal in nature. As Windows Central puts it here, the US government's patent office used Nintendo's own history of patents against them to prove their claims were unoriginal and not applicable because every patent Nintendo issued was done in bad faith. They knew that these patents were not actually legit, they were just remixes of really what came before. An example given is like if someone were to put stickers on a phone and suddenly claim, oh, it's a brand new phone phone now. It's no longer the product that it was before, but you take one look at the phone with the stickers on it and you would go, yeah, no, that's still an iPhone. It just has stickers on it. That's not a new product. That's kind of what Nintendo was trying to do, proving this was all kind of in bad faith from the beginning, which is what I said when this first happened, by the way. I knew Nintendo was going to lose this because it was smelling something rank from the start, dude. None of this comes across as something that would really pass. The only way that this would pass is if everybody involved had no eyes or ears to tell the difference. It's why I kind of resented Nintendo for this, not gonna lie, because they tried to rob people of a game they loved simply out of greed. It's really not cool, man. It sucks, but I think this also leads to another thing that's actually a positive, which is that Nintendo losing this can really mean only one thing. If Palworld is able to exist now and do whatever it wants, well, Nintendo, they have to step their game up. They need to ensure that any Pokemon game in the future is no longer being phoned in or slop. They need to ensure these games are actually, again, exceptional products if people are going to be swayed to keep supporting them, because objectively looking at Pokemon and Palworld, you're getting more content in Palworld for like less than half the price, and all the DLC and new pals being added, they're just included in the price that you paid for it already. In Nintendo's case, they've routinely included expansions to their games at crazy prices. Pokemon Sword, for example, is seen here, has its expansion pass still sitting at a solid $40 price point, which is nuts. This is on top of the fully priced video game you already need just to access this content, but Nintendo doesn't care, right? Because what are you going to do about it? You either pay up or you leave. But if Palworld is costing as much as the expansion pass for any given Pokemon game with more content and free updates, Nintendo needs to seriously reconsider their business model to ensure that their players don't riot or protest or leave. Because currently, I'm going to say it, Nintendo is manipulating their Pokemon fans with how they've priced their games. I mean, they have. Why is Pokemon Sword's DLC still fully priced years later? Because there's not enough competition. That's the only reason. Nintendo has been on autopilot for so long, raking in the billions, and the moment they got challenged, they tried to nuke their competition from orbit. That should tell you everything when it comes to how Nintendo thinks when it comes to their most lucrative IPs. But honestly, I think what Nintendo was trying to say with all of this was that they wanted to send a message, which was, don't challenge the king. They really thought they could do that. One of the most aggressive defenders of IP in the entire industry, by the way. A company that rarely if ever loses, but looking at it now, this is not about the weakness in the lawsuit or the patent strategy. This is about the weakness in Nintendo's approach to innovation as a concept. Because with Palworld, Nintendo was suddenly facing something it hadn't really in a long time, right? A competitor in a space that wasn't playing by their rules. But I think the other reason Nintendo was so mad about Palworld was not because it was trying to copy Pokemon, but because Palworld was delivering something that many fans have been asking for years within a game like Pokemon. A bigger world, right? More survival mechanics, base building even, more robust multiplayer systems, more freedom in general. Whether people liked or didn't like Palworld, one thing was still clear. People were interested, very much so. That's why this hit a nerve the way it did, because this wasn't about guns and Pokemon or something, really. It was all about demand. Pokemon became too predictable and comfortable with things. Palworld showed people what happens when you take something that you already know and are familiar with, but you move it in a new direction. That's why it was deemed dangerous, not because Nintendo will lose revenue. No, Nintendo's going to be fine. But Palworld still challenged that narrative, guys, which was that nobody wanted alternatives to Pokemon. But clearly, they did. I think that's why this story, for a lot of reasons, resonated the way that it did. Because many, including myself, likely didn't see this as Nintendo protecting stuff like creativity. For me, at least, it was just Nintendo being mean and attempting to limit what others could be doing and make, I guess. I think the moment Nintendo tried to do what they did, it made a lot of people look at Nintendo differently, and I really can't blame them, because all Nintendo did was generate support for Palworld, and it made what should have been a lawsuit that was straightforward, at least at first, into a battle for innovation, right? Which is why Nintendo lost that goodwill. Overall, this entire story, it is about the industry. Palworld kind of proved that something executives really didn't want to hear, right? That players will in fact leave these established brands if someone makes a more exciting version of it elsewhere. That's kind of scary to them. That should terrify the people in charge, not because they'll go bankrupt, but because it means that loyalty, no matter what, is really never guaranteed. You simply cannot rely on legacy forever, or nostalgia and brand recognition. Eventually, people are going to want something new, and you really can't blame them. And when they don't get what they want, someone else, like Palworld, is going to provide it for for them instead. Palworld hasn't destroyed Nintendo. It's not going to replace Pokemon, but that's not really the point. What matters is Palworld exposed a weakness in the overall games industry, if you ask me. That belief that these massive corporations can just endlessly rely on legacy brands while innovation kind of becomes secondary to them, which Pokemon, I mean, come on, that's that brand to a T. The only reason those games started going open world is because everybody complained and demanded it. Otherwise, Nintendo would have been perfectly fine just phoning it in game after game if it meant the same billions were still going to be generated, which they would have. But the reason that Palworld exploded wasn't because it was perfect. I mean, it wasn't. The reason it just had what it had in popularity and sales is because it actually offered something that players, they felt like they weren't getting elsewhere for a really long time now. And that's really the lesson every publisher should be paying attention to here, because when a relatively small developer like a Pocket Pair at the time can go and create a game like that shakes one of gaming's biggest companies and IPs no less, like that's not even just a success story, man. That's a big fat warning that is telling you that success is just no longer guaranteed. And these companies do need to still create value if they want to continue raking in the billions like they used to. Otherwise, people are just going to look elsewhere. And no matter how powerful you think you are, that even if you're Nintendo, man, that demand can still be taken for granted. We'll see how this all goes down in October and November this year, but honestly, I think it's just over for Nintendo when it comes to this. They lost. They're not going to win. There's nothing they can really do to change what happens next. And honestly, good. I'm glad. Palworld won, guys. Rejoice. Now let's hope companies don't try to do other scummy things like this in the future. If the only way you can win is by suppressing or trying to erase your competition like Nintendo tried, you got to take a good look at yourself, man. But Nintendo lost the war and we all won. That's awesome. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to. See you next time, guys.